It's me, Captain. My mommy is the best. Supermom, love you best. She helps mommy get those smiles back. The tickles back. Others might go back. You wait for the short brush. Get ready for that super discovery. That super squad.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Healing for the Soul podcast. It is your go-to resource for parents and want-to-be parents who strive for success without sacrificing connection and well-being. Each episode delivers actionable strategies and inspiring insights to help you build emotional intelligence and resilience for yourself and for your family. Strengthen relationships with yourself, your partner, and your children. Master parenting as an entrepreneur, even while raising young children. Discover life and parenting hacks that simplify your journey. Explore hypnosis and other healing modalities for a deeper transformation. This podcast isn't just about parenting and a fertility journey. It's about creating harmony, wealth, and alignment in every area of life. Let's get started.
This is season 6, and I am your host, Supermom Robin Stoltman. Today's guest is Mark Steven Porro, a New Jersey native, the exit 163. He earned an industrial design degree from the Ohio State University. After years of agency work, his love of acting led him to Hollywood, where he appeared in dozens of television, film, and stage productions. Mark also spent his 28 years in Tinseltown in entrepreneuring. He started 5 nonprofit companies, but hold the applause, none were intended to be. He now lives in the south of France, but hold your pity. He is of sound mind and body, chose to suffer in the heart of wine country, where the locals insist his French isn't so bad. At least that's what he thinks they're saying. Mark is an award-winning designer, writer, director, and now a best-selling, award-winning author. He has written lots of jokes, several screenplays, and one award-winning short film. A Cup of Tea on the Commode, which is his first book, has won 15 literally awards to date. Thank you, Mark, for being here with our audience. Thank you for the tongue twister as well.
Yeah, there goes my writing career with these tongue twisters. Yeah. My pleasure.
Well, I'm excited to know more about you and like what you're doing here with all the things that you have done. How was that an accident, you said?
No, not an accident. None were intended to be nonprofit. They were all started with good intention, and I thought, and I worked my tail off to make each one successful. But things happen. When I first met, I met my niece's new father-in-law at the wedding, and we were chatting, and he said, what do you do? And I said, I started 5 nonprofit businesses. And he's looking at me like I'm Jesus. And I said, but none were intended to be. And then we shared a good laugh, and we moved on. But from each of those experiences, I didn't consider it a failure. It was like I took what I learned and used it in the next project, and then the next, et cetera, et cetera. But that's kind of my MO. Throughout life, and I guess with relationships and stuff like that too, if I got bored, I moved on. I like new challenges and new adventures, and which kind of brought me to the subject of the book, A Cup of Tea in the Commode, because that's when everything had to change, because there was going to be no moving on in that particular adventure. So things changed very quickly and abruptly there.
So what did change? Can you tell me more about what happened for where you got that inspiration to write A Cup of Tea on the Commode, which is an interesting title too at the same time, by the way.
I'll tell you, I'll tell you the story first, and then we'll talk about the title, if that's okay. I was living in LA, pursuing acting. I also had one of my last businesses, which actually was a profit business. It was a snack food business that my brother and I started to honor my dad and his half-popped popcorn invention. And it was called Grandpa Poe's Originals, and it was a nationwide brand. And we were the snack of the day on the Rachel Ray Show, and it was very successful for a while. But that's a tough business. And when you're a little person or a little company doing well, the big companies come in, and if they can't buy you, they cause trouble. And so eventually we got tired of battling with the big guys. And so, but around that time is when this incident with my mom happened. So I was a carefree bachelor in LA, having a great time. And like I said, if, with never married, had no children, if I had a relationship that wasn't all that exciting, I moved on. And I did that with various careers as well. But I got a call from my brother in New Jersey. My mother was living in the house we all grew up in. And he said she was on her deathbed, and her doctor cut off all meds and food and said she's transitioning, call hospice. And so all her kids, I had five siblings, we all came back home because we thought mom was leaving us. And so when I got there the next day, hospice was on duty. And so my younger sister and I hung out with hospice because we didn't know how long mom was going to be with us, but we wanted to take care of her as much as we could for as long as she wanted to be here. And so we learned a lot of tips and tricks, and hospice was great and very generous, letting us learn how to, change a diaper with a helpless patient lying in bed because she was I called it semi-comatose. She didn't respond. She didn't talk. She barely opened her eyes. And for several weeks, she didn't eat. We gave her a little moisture on her lips and stuff to keep her comfortable, but that was it. And but after a few weeks, I think I have a chapter in the book called A Silent Scream. I think it was a cry for help. She just turned 89, and I think she looked around at her life and she wasn't happy. And she did suffer from some depression, I think, throughout her life. But she kept it well hidden. But over the last few years, it started to come out more and more. And I think this thing was, I'm out of here because I'm not happy with this. And because there was no medical reason, no physical reason, just I think it was all mental. And but after I think love came back in the house and all her kids were there, and we wanted her to stick around, she kind of snapped out of it. And so I started looking around and saying, okay, well, the environment isn't that great. We had a family living upstairs that was supposed to be overseeing household duties and keeping her company, and they did not get along. And she, to me, wasn't looking great. I thought she could have been better cared for. So the wheel started turning where I think I had to play a bigger role. And so eventually I moved back. And so this was a commitment that I made, and I asked for her permission when she woke up, and she trusted me, and so she said yes, and my siblings all supported that decision. So I moved back, and this was going to be one commitment that I wasn't going to be able to walk away from, and so that was very important. That was a good lesson for me. So that was it, and it's rare for a son to take on these caregiving roles, and because it still primarily falls on the ladies of the family. So it was a little bit unusual with me doing this, but I had a great relationship with both of my folks. And at this point, my dad had been gone for 14 years. And so I wanted to make my mother's last years as happy and as joyful as possible. And so that was my goal.
So with your mom leaving, she didn't leave right away then at all, after the hospice. How did that happen? Like you said, you think it was, yeah.
Well, she wasn't happy and she didn't respond. Yeah. Now, it was kind of funny because no food or drink or medication in about 3 weeks. And we discovered, because we had a steady stream of hospice in New Jersey, once hospice is called, they are, I think, contracted to stay at least 6 months. Usually the patient doesn't last that long. And the ending is usually not a happy one. But with mom, she hung in there. And then one of these hospice nurses who broke the rules came in And she read the directive from her supervisor. It said no food, no drink. And she went right into my mom's bedroom and said, "Mrs. Porro, are you hungry?" And my mother's eyes snapped open like a dinner bell rang. And it was like, oh my gosh. And then this lady accused me and my sister, who were there at the time, of starving our mother to death, which we were not. We were following the orders from hospice. And then she went in and called her supervisor, and the supervisor said, you broke the rules. You have to leave. We're going to send another nurse in. But in the meantime, I'm thinking, well, maybe hospice was wrong, and mom wasn't ready to go. So I was feeling pretty guilty at this point. So I went into her room and I said, "Mom, are you in fact hungry?" And she said, "Well, what do you got?" And those were her first words in 3 weeks. So I'm like, "Well, anything you want." And it was March at this point. And she says, "How about some pumpkin pie?" And I said, "Well, okay." And it's not pumpkin pie season in the States. So in the living room, my brother was there. And he lived locally. So I said, "If you can go find some pumpkin pies, please do." And so he came back with probably within a half hour with 2 fresh pumpkin pies. I don't know where he got them. I don't know if he baked them himself or whatever, but that was it. So I had a pumpkin pie and I bring it to my mom and I gave her a spoonful and she spit out the first spoonful. And I said, well, didn't go so well, but that was her first food in weeks. So it was understandable. The second spoonful went down great. And she downed half the pie. And whether it was a sugar rush or whatever, I don't know, but she was back. The color came back in her face. She was wide awake. And it was great. So pumpkin pie, I call it the miracle pumpkin pie. And the next day she downed the other half of the pumpkin pie. And then the next day, I think she downed the entire pie. And it was great. So mom's back. And everything kind of changed at that point. But hospice did stay on for a number more months. And I stayed there for probably a couple of months also to make sure she was, in fact, fully back and wanting to live and everything like that. And so that was great. But that made me start thinking about moving back and making sure mom was healthy and safe. And so that was the beginning of it. And so while I was doing that, it was 3.5 years that I spent with mom. And so that was our adventures. And I just took a lot of notes because I had a writing background from Hollywood and stuff like that. And I like to record family history. And I was privy to some really fun moments and conversations. And my mother had some pretty interesting visions. She suffered from a little dementia at this time. And I didn't want my siblings to miss out on these moments. So I just started recording them. I did video, took a lot of photographs, but I also wrote down a lot of notes, not knowing what I was going to do with it at the time. I just wanted to keep a record of what was going on. And so that was the beginning of the book.
No, that's wonderful that you got another 3.5 years, even after hospice.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm glad that the one nurse chose not to read. She read the work, but she didn't read the work.
Yeah, we found out a lot of the nurses were rebels. They like to administer their own medical advice and stuff. And so this one happened. It was great. And then we had another one too, because again, at this point, my mother, she was bedridden, so she wasn't walking at all. And the directive still was now she's eating, but she stays in bed. And we took a break at one point because hospice was there. And we came back and my mother was in the kitchen eating lunch. And we said, "What are you doing?" And this nurse, before I got really angry, this nurse said, "I took one look at your mother and said, this lady is not ready to die. You're getting up and you're eating your lunch in the kitchen like normal people." And so this was another one that just went by common sense, and it was fantastic. And my mother was looking very happy. She was actually feeding herself. This, again, the first time, this was probably maybe 6 weeks into this. So that was another thing. So I love these rebel nurses. So it was pretty good. And so it kept improving, I think, at that point. And I actually got her up and walking. My mother was a tough cookie, but she did like being pampered, which I noticed. So she let me do everything. There was no line that I didn't cross. And being a son doing this at first it was awkward because I'm seeing my mother naked for the first time. And you're seeing what the years have done to her and what gravity has done to her and all previous, let's say, surgeries and things like that. And it was kind of awkward, but that's kind of where I think my acting background kicked in because I said, I'm going to be the caregiver, so I got to get over it and on with it because I have work to do and I have a role to play. And I don't want my mother to feel uncomfortable. So one of the things I wanted to make sure I did is make sure she knew I was fine with this. And if I had any issues, uncomfortableness or awkwardness, I left them out of the room. And then I also, another one of my goals was to make her laugh at least once a day. Both of my folks had really fun senses of humor, and fortunately, they passed that down to their kids. And so it was great to see her laugh, and then she made me laugh quite a bit too.
Well, that's wonderful though, because I'm just like what you said for about what gravity has done to her, like the surgeries, without going into a lot of detail, but it's like you can imagine like how hard that would be, like you said, because you're a son taking care of his mother. And like me, I've got 7 boys and 1 girl. So for me, I'm hoping one of my boys will be able to be strong enough to take care of me when I get older,
Well, if they read my book, they'll get it. So it was, but I mean, she made it easier too. I mean, but it was my first child. I never had a kid. So my first child was my 90-year-old mother who was stubborn and guilt tripping. And it was, and she could be a little sharp tongued as well. So it was interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, and yet they're the best though too. Because when I worked in a nursing home, I know how it can be, but that's taking care of somebody else's mom and dad. But I also know like that sharp tongue part of when they start getting there, and then like the dementia, that's really hard. Like when you see people go through that. And then their loved ones and all that. So I know like the nursing home aspect of what I've seen. But at the same time, you said you were saving all these stories and you didn't know what you were going to do with them. So then why did you decide to write the book then? Like when did you decide to write it? Because she lived for another 3.5 years.
Yeah. So the note taking was, I say, a normal thing. And from my experience in Hollywood, I would think, oh, maybe I can make a movie out of this. Or, from other things I did from vacations, I wrote poetry to let's say, summarize what we did on these family vacations. And I did these, I had a memory book collection that I did for everybody when they hit a monumental birthday. And so I shot a documentary of taking my dad to this little village in Italy where his father came from a few years earlier. And so recording family history was kind of second nature. But while I was going through this experience and what I learned from hospice, I had a friend going through something like that with one of her folks. And so I shared some of the tips and tricks that I learned, and she seemed to get some benefit out of it. And so then I thought, I think a book would probably be better, certainly quicker to get out and to help people. And so that's when I started thinking about writing a book. But I got too emotional thinking about it and stuff. So I needed some emotional and also physical distance because I didn't write the book until I moved to France. So a couple of years, spoiler alert, a couple of years after my mom passed, I moved to France. And then I really started knuckling down and concentrating on writing the book.
Huh. So you're still living in the south of France right now?
Yeah. Right here.
Oh.
This is the room where I wrote the book.
That's awesome. So that explains, because when I look at the room, it's very calming. It's very peaceful from what I can see in the background, but it's also more that relaxed.
Yeah, this building is almost 500 years old too, and it's there's a lot of history in my little village, and certainly in this building as well and stuff. So it's very cool just to be here, Anyway, so I never wrote a book before. I wrote
Yeah.
screenplays and films and things like that. But I started studying online with a memoir teacher, and then started reading certainly a lot of a memoir, and then I started writing, and my memoir teacher actually was my first editor, and I wanted to be published. I wanted to be a published author, and I wanted this to be a really good quality book. So that's why I started studying. And after she gave me some great notes, and then I did a revision, and then I started approaching publishers. And I actually had two publishers interested. And I went with the one that was more interested in quality as opposed to speed, because I had the other one. They're still a good publisher, but they wanted to get this out, let's say, by Christmas. And the other guy said, no, we're going to do this. And so we spent about a year and a half revising it. And but they liked my voice, they liked the story, they liked the potential of the book. And I really needed help with structure because it's not only the story of the 3.5 year, I call them my adventures, but also I had a lot of backstory and some
Okay.
funny family stories that help support some of the decisions and actions that I took throughout our journey. Because I was brought up in a very loving, nurturing family, and we all learned the golden rule, and it was a pretty strict Catholic upbringing, so we knew how to care for others and do the right thing, and certainly honor thy father and mother,
Yeah.
and so that's just kind of became second nature to do this.
Well, that's amazing though, because I'm like thinking you've got all these things because I'm like what we said, the tongue twister for everything. That's I'm like I gotta be very careful with everything that I'm saying here. And it's like you've done the award-winning designer, the writer, the director, now you're best-selling author, award-winning author. Out of all of that, like you've got a lot of things that you've accomplished. But what would you say is like your greatest accomplishment, like out of all of that that
Oh,
you've done? Yeah.
was my taking care of mom. That was
Well,
the best role I ever played, and I think the most important role certainly that I played because with my dad also, I only had eight
yeah,
days with my dad, and he's going to be the main subject of my next book. Um, but with mom, we had the 3.5 years, and so like my dad, I was with my dad when he took his last breath, and he died in his bed in his home that we all grew up in with me and one of my sisters. And I was there for those 8 days, and I spent a lot of those days with him, taking care of him. And so for him, it was a great way to leave this earth. And for my mom, I selfishly said I'm going to be with her until she takes her last breath, too. That was one of my promises to myself. And so she died again in her bed, in her bedroom, in the house we
yeah,
all grew up in, with me, and my younger sister was with me when mom passed. And neither one had very much pain. They went out the way they wanted to. Neither one wanted to be in the hospital. My dad especially didn't want to be in a hospital. My mom was very comfortable at home, so there was no question about that. And so it was a great way for both of them to leave this earth, and also a very comforting, I think, way for us to accept them leaving because there's no regrets with neither of my folks. I don't think we had left anything unsaid. And luckily with mom, I had the extra 3.5 years to do that stuff. With dad, it was pretty quick, but we
yeah.
talked forever, and it was great because we shared stories and some concerns that we had before in our life, and there were some things we had to clear up, which we did. And with mom, it was the same thing. So it was a lovely goodbye. If there was a way to say goodbye, that was lovely. I think we experienced that.
Well, yeah, definitely, because you're not dealing with like the nursing home and all of that, like what I've seen. 'Cause I learned that the quickest way, if you want it to go, is to go into a nursing home. Like
Yeah,
and it's sad. It really is.
yeah.
But I like what you said. It's like the greatest accomplishment was taking care of your mom. I've tried to explain that to people before. I'm like, like my husband as an example, I'm like, I've got a lot of things that I've accomplished, but I'm like, that's just stuff. I'm like, the greatest accomplishment is all the kids that I've had.
Sure.
And we're still together after going through stuff. I'm just saying, like, that's my take on it. But then I'm also wondering, like, you started the 5 nonprofits, and
You have to keep rubbing that in, don't you?
well, I'm just saying, like, how did you do that? And like, how did that help with the entrepreneurship and like the purpose?
Well, I was always a very creative guy. Both of my folks, especially my dad, was an inventor and like a tinker.
Yeah.
He was a chemist, so he was a clever guy and very smart. And my mom was a proofreader for the largest newspaper in New Jersey. So we grew up with these two people working full time, and both seemed to be
Yeah.
pretty ambitious. My mom was a shopaholic, so she had to support her habit. So she had to work full
I
time.
know that one.
Yeah. And so I always tried to invent things and create things. I had a very strong creative side. And that's what led me to industrial design because it married a lot of my loves, which math at the time was math and science and art. And that fused all three together. It was great. I didn't even know that profession existed when I went to college. And so that was very cool. So, when you're out in Hollywood as an actor, I didn't want to be a waiter. I did have a design career and I had a design job when I left, when I arrived in LA. But I wanted to do more things. And that was a place in the 80s. It was a great place. If you had any ambition, you could try anything. So I started like greeting card company was the first. Well, acting it was certainly one thing, but then I
Yeah.
started a greeting card company, and then I got into art dealing. So you try to do art dealing. I discovered this one Russian artist who was living on the streets, and then he started painting and making tons of money. And so I thought, oh, that could be a great project. So maybe we can make a movie out of his story, and stuff like that. And then the writing career, and then I did stand up for a bit. So that was basically another nonprofit, I suppose. And then screenwriting certainly was a nonprofit. Even though I had some success with writing and producing that short film, it did win a comedy award, which was fun. But there's no money in that. And then the snack
Yeah.
food business was the last endeavor. And that was actually very good, but still, we probably made some profit. But boy, that's a very expensive thing. We
Yeah.
ended up building our own factory. We made more money renting the factory out than we did actually when we had the company,
Wow.
because
Yeah.
the real estate and stuff was lovely. And then we sold that factory, and that's where we made some real money, which was nice. But the potential was there, and it could have been a multi-million dollar company if things went right. But it's just like in Hollywood. You never know. I started off, I went out there and I said I wanted to be a good actor. So I started studying right away. And my goal was to get on at that time. I think the number one show was Hill Street Blues. And I said, I want to be a good actor. So I want to be on a show like that. And less than 2 years later, I was on Hill Street Blues.
Wow.
And that was great. And then I didn't work again for 7 months. And that's normal. You never know when your next job is going to come. So it was like, so luckily I had
Wow.
the design work in between to help, feed me because I liked eating and I didn't like
Well,
sleeping on the
yeah.
street. So, yeah,
So
but it toughens you up. Certainly Hollywood's, you got to get a thick skin to survive there. But all these, I guess, endeavors, you build up I guess, certainly experience, but a tough skin to say, okay, fine, this one didn't work. I'm going to take what I learned that was positive and take it to the next project. And I have to say that all those things came into play when I took this role on for Mom, because I had to have patience, which you learn in a lot of businesses.
yeah.
I had to learn empathy, which I knew from design certainly, because you have to really take into consideration your clients, how they're going to respond to something. So you got to put yourself in their shoes. And in acting, you have to learn empathy because you have to learn how to be another character. And with Mom, you have to, she's still your mother, but she's a little slower. and she may be a little grumpy and difficult to deal with. And they may have a bit of dementia. Out of the 6 kids, I was the only one whose name she couldn't remember for a while. And I'm the one taking care of her 24/7.
Wow,
Which was
that's hard.
But yeah, but again, I didn't take it personally. What I did is I wrote my name, M-A-R-K, big block letters, and taped it to the ceiling. So when I went in the morning, I'd say good morning, and she'd say good morning, and then look up and get my name and turn and be very proud and go good morning, Mark. And after a while, she was fine. But for a few weeks, she didn't know who the heck I was. And I would tell her, I'm your favorite son. And she goes, I don't have a favorite. I said, well, you have a favorite to forget. And again, you find the humor in it because they love you and they don't mean anything by it. So that all certainly came into play. The sense of humor was another big thing. But I didn't learn the true meaning of unconditional love until I was in this role. Because there was no walking away like I would do with other things until Mom wanted to leave, and that was really important. So that was a good lesson for me. And I have to, I'll tell you this thing before we have to close. So the book came out on Mother's Day, actually 2023, and I couldn't do the audio book for a while because I get too emotional talking about family. And so it was about 6 months in between. And then I built a studio here in France, and I recorded it. But I had 6 months away from it, so I could look at the book with fresh eyes and make some corrections because there were some tongue twisters in there, if you can imagine. And because as I'm recording, I'm going, who wrote this? This is very difficult. And luckily, there weren't too many of those. But with those fresh eyes, I was able to look at this thing and go, you know what? I think I can look at this a little differently. Because if you hear the story, it sounds like I went back to rescue my mom, which in a sense I did. But upon reflection, I think my mom rescued me. Because at that point, I did a lot of good things. And maybe some things that people would be impressed with and stuff like that. But I never did anything all that important. And my mother gave me this opportunity, whether she was conscious or unconscious about it. She gave me this opportunity to do something really special. And I was luckily smart enough to take it on. And so I love that aspect that my mom was still teaching me, even though she was kind of drifting away and stuff like that. So I thank her every day for that because it was a great experience, certainly for me. And I think a lot of people are also benefiting from it with me being able to share our story and our adventures and stuff like that. So that was really cool.
Well, most definitely, too. So now I'm thinking, no wonder why people that know me have said for me to stay away from Hollywood because I don't got the thick skin that's required. I got it in certain things, but it's a skill.
Yeah, it's a tough business, but you got to love it. You got to be a little crazy too, but you got to love it. And I did, but you get to a point where you're saying, okay, there's more important things, or I don't love it that much. I have other things that I do want to accomplish, and I think some of my friends are not happy that I left, but that's part of it.
So what's the best way for our audience to get in contact with you, or just to at least follow you to get to know more, especially with your book?
If they Google A Cup of Tea on the Commode, we're everywhere. I've got certainly the website is acupofteaonthecommode.org, but I have a YouTube channel. It's all A Cup of Tea. Everything from Facebook to TikTok to Instagram. We're all over the place, and I've done certainly tons of interviews. But it's on certainly Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and I think it's in a lot of stores around the world as well. But Amazon has the paperback, large print paperback, ebook, and also the audiobook, which is kind of fun because I added some music and some sound effects and stuff, some production value in the audiobook, which is kind of fun. But I'll tell you if I could wrap up. So the Cup of Tea in the Commode came from My mother's favorite beverage was a cup of tea, skim milk, no sugar. And sometimes while she was on the Commode, Mother Nature took a little longer than was comfortable for either one of us. So one day, as a joke, I said, "Would you like a cup of tea while we're waiting?" And she said yes, and it became a hit. So that became one of our morning routines, a cup of tea on the Commode. So I thought that was a pretty catchy title.
As always, I just want to thank you for your time and energy while listening to today's episode of Healing for the Soul podcast. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Healing for the Soul podcast wherever you get your downloads, you're listening to your podcasts, and keep coming back for more episodes. Thank you, everyone, for your time and your energy while listening to today's episode of Healing for the Soul podcast, which also can be found on YouTube.